morning, everyone. Welcome to meeting number 113 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates. The committee recommended by 4 out of 5 parliamentary budget officers. Pursuant to Standing Order 81-4, the committee is meeting today to consider items in main estimates 2024-2025. We welcome...
Mr. Chair, point of order, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have been a member of this committee for 5 years now, and I take pride in the work of this committee, and I take particular pride in the fact that this is a committee that has traditionally been collaborative, and we work together to get to the bottom of things and do the work that constituents and residents and Canadians expect of us to do. We've always worked together. Always worked together. Let me get to my point, please.
You can get to the point of order, please.
And for the last 5 years, every single chair, and there's been multiple chairs chairing this committee, has always sought instruction from committee members whenever an action was to be taken. And that is a bedrock principle of how this committee has conducted itself for 5 years. Point of order, Mr. Chair. Please allow me to continue. This is important.
No, but please get your point of order, please, Mr. Kuznichuk.
I am. Last week, a meeting was called without consultation and instruction of this committee. This week, we had 2 meetings scheduled without consultation or instruction or consent from this committee. A witness today was invited yesterday. We found out about this witness at 7 p.m. last night. There was no consultation, no instruction from this committee. And tomorrow we found out from Global News, that there may be another meeting tomorrow with additional witnesses. And again, no instruction, no consultation. And so I'm asking the chair to explain to this committee, because this is completely out of tradition and the way we've operated in the last 5 years on this committee. This is something that is
Mr. Chair, I've been very patient. I have not heard any section.
I'd like to ask the chair to explain how this meeting came about. I have a few questions for the chair, how this meeting came about, what efforts were made by the chair to consult with members of this committee and seek instruction. And a further question, why is this meeting being held today on a constituency week? And why is this witness here before us here today? And so this is a point of order. This is outside of the tradition of how this committee has conducted itself over the last 5 years.
I'm going to cut you off there to get to an answer.
To explain his actions.
Sure. Well, first of all, to start, it's not a valid point of order, but I will answer your questions. The premiers, representing over 60% of the population, wrote to the Chair of Finance to address the issue of the increase of the carbon tax. The Liberal chair, maybe under political pressure from his own party, refused to. As the premiers are the highest office holders in their provinces, representing millions and millions of Canadians, I thought we should respect the provinces and invite the premiers to participate in our study of the estimates, which includes the government spending, including the carbon tax. There's lots of examples of other chairs doing such things. It is the privilege and obligation, I think, of the chair to call meetings, and I did so. I'm happy to go through some of the examples of other chairs from government-led parties doing the same, but it is within the prerogative of the chair to call such meetings, and I did. And we're ready to start the meeting.
Mr. Chair, again, point of order. Section 108 of the standing orders clearly states that committee members instruct the chair on any action. And so I ask you again, what instruction, what consultation, even basic consultation, did the chair undertake to schedule this week's meetings, including the meeting that, again, we hear is going to be scheduled for tomorrow, and to seek again, instruction from this committee? I think it's really important because this is a departure. Folks that are listening, I want them to know that this is a departure from the way we've conducted business at OGGO committee for 5 years. This is new.
Yeah, it is within the powers and the prerogatives of the chair to call meetings, Mr. Kuzmierczuk. Our clerk is looking at the exact quote ruling, if you wish, but it is fully within the powers of the chair. For example, the Liberal chair of Natural Resources called a meeting without anyone's knowledge in order to ram through the anti-Alberta, anti-energy industry
Point of order.
C-250. So it has been done in the past. And yeah, please let me finish, Ms. Atwin. It is fully within the powers of the chair to call such meetings, and I have. Go ahead, Ms. Atwin.
Mr. Chair, I think you're taking a little bit of liberty there, insinuating that there's some sort of Liberal government was pushing our Liberal chair in another committee not to have these meetings. I'm certainly they're respecting the time and commitments of their committee members.
That's not a point of order, Ms. Atwin.
I'm getting there, actually, Mr. Chair. I would actually like to highlight your own bias in making this decision. I'm noticing the stickers that have always been present as props in this committee. You love pipelines and oil and gas, and it's very clear. And so perhaps that had a stake in this decision that you've made today.
Mr. Chair, that's not a valid point of order.
It's not a valid point of order. I do. So let me finish. Yeah. I do love oil and gas. If it bothers you, I will close my laptop. Mr. Drouin and Mr. Lawrence, and then we're going to start the meeting.
So I'm not a regular member of this committee, but I've been a member of this committee for 6 years. Never would Tom Lukiski, a good Saskatchewan MP, have done this. Never in his lifetime would he have done this.
That's not a point of order,
and the precedent that you are setting, Mr. Chair,
Mr.
is
Drouin,
that
not a point
I can
of
tell
order.
you your side will be pissed off with us because we'll call meetings at our disposal, and your side will not be happy with us.
That is the chair's
If that's the way you want to set the precedence of this committee, I'm telling you, we're going to challenge you.
Okay. That is the chair's prerogative to call a meeting if he wishes. If another committee wishes to do
Mr. Chair,
so,
if you're saying that no motions and no instructions from the chair must be undertaken from now on, that is false. That is simply false.
I'm going to read to you, and for Mr. Kuzmierczuk as well. Committee chairs have considerable administrative responsibilities, starting with those involving the committee's program of activities and compliance. With instructions from the committee or an order from the House, the chair calls committee meetings. So,
well, Mr. Chair, point of order, and I believe exactly. I think you said it right there, and it bears repeating. It bears repeating. In compliance with instructions from the committee. In compliance with instructions from the committee. In compliance with instructions from the committee.
yeah, let me
Mr. Chair,
just
you have
address.
neither sought, you
Let
have
me
neither
interrupt
sought
you on that, Mr.
instruction nor
Kuzmierczuk.
consultation from this committee.
Mr. Kuzmierczuk, let me address
that. You have acted unilaterally outside the will of this committee. That is the issue that I have with you, sir.
The meeting.
If you want to schedule meetings with witnesses, work with committee members. That's the way we've always done it. Past chairs have always respected that principle.
Please let me address your point of order.
Today. That is the issue that I have with you today.
If I could respond, I will address that. We are meeting on the estimates, the 2024-25 estimates, which the committee has agreed to. That is what our meeting is on today, and that is what I noted when I did my opening statement. Under Standing Order 81 for the committee's meeting to commence the consideration of the main estimates 2025.
And why did you schedule this meeting today on a constituency week? May I ask, Mr. Chair, so that folks watching can know this?
This is going to be the
study on the main estimates. When is it due, Mr. Chair? When is the study, the committee study on the estimates due?
We are meeting on the estimates. I have the prerogative to call a meeting on the estimates that the committee agreed to. We are now going to turn.
When is it due, sir?
That is beside the point, Mr. Kuzmierczuk.
May 31st.
That's nice.
May 31st.
That's fine.
May
We're now
31st.
going to turn things over to
Mr. Chair, point of order. I just want to clarify to this committee, you've mentioned main estimates, and I'll remind that this committee is responsible for Vote 1 under Canada Post Corporation, Vote 1 under Canada School of Public Service, Vote 1 under Canadian Intergovernmental Conference Secretary. So I'm hoping that Premier Moe will be able to answer questions about Canada Post Corporations. I'm not sure he will be because that's not his responsibility. So again, we're asking for.
I will quote once, and then we're going to get to.
With the consent of committee. You did not get the consent of committee.
Mr. Moe. in the main estimates, CRA, distribution of fuel charges.
This committee is not responsible for
noting that
CRA.
$6.8 billion going to 9.5, but it's the part of the main estimates, and we are studying the main estimates.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Duran,
Mr.
we
Chair,
should
I've been a long-time member of this committee before my appearance here. I understand what this committee is responsible, and you're misleading committee.
Point of order, Mr.
CRA
Chair.
goes to
You've been
finance,
very
and you know
patient.
damn well that's where it goes.
Okay.
You've been very.
First of all, refrain from the language, Mr. Druin.
Pardon my
For the
French.
once. Okay, you're
Mr.
not
Chair,
gonna make-
you've been
you're not
very
gonna make
patient,
friends with that one.
and I could recite numerous times that Peter Fonseca, Chair of the Finance, has adjourned and called without instructions. I could rattle them off, Francis. So this is ridiculous. Let's move on. We've got the Premier Mo. I know that you guys don't want to talk about the carbon tax and you don't want to hear from the people of Saskatchewan, but Canadians do.
Thanks, Mr. Our Premier Mo. We're going to turn things.
Mr. Chair, I have a point of order, and this is going to be my last point of order, but it needs to be made.
Please get to it.
You called a meeting unilaterally without instruction or consultation with the members of this committee. That is a fundamental bedrock principle. And furthermore, you called this meeting on the mains. The deadline to study this is May 31st. There is no reason to call this meeting during a constituency week when we literally have 2.5 months to study the mains. This is a political stunt and theater, which is part and parcel of where our conservative colleagues are taking this to get clips.
Can you get to your point of order, please? Speaking of
That
getting
is my
clips.
point. That is
Okay,
my point,
it's
sir.
not a-
You unilaterally called a meeting that was not necessary this week because your team is after clips.
Okay,
And
thanks.
and again, I take issue and umbrage with that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but it's not a valid point of order. Ms. Vignola, then hopefully we can get to our honorable guests. Ms. Vignola, go ahead, please.
Je vous remercie.
I'd like to thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I simply wanted to add to the facts in this matter. According to the standing orders, meetings must be called 48 hours in advance. And members of the committee must be informed, or at the very least, consulted in the choice of witnesses, which is not the case, and which has not been the case for some time. And contrary to what my colleague to my right would dare to claim, well, that I'm not interested in hearing about Saskatchewans. Well, it actually is important for me to see all perspectives. Even in Quebec, the carbon tax doesn't apply, and yet it's important to hear from all stakeholders, all perspectives. Now, that said, I would like now to denounce the methods that are being used in going about this. Had we been informed, we probably would have given our consent. Let's hear from these witnesses. However, we were not informed, we were not consulted, and as Deputy Chair of this committee, I find this to be a great pity, not only in terms of my own preparation and my own research in preparation for a meeting, but also, of course, it's important to give witnesses the time and to ask questions of them that have to do with the matters that we are currently studying, regardless of whether it's the estimates or another issue or matter. Now, not only is there a requirement for 48 hours notice when there's a request made to hold a meeting, but during a non-sitting week, this is a constituency week, which are invaluable to all of us, for all of us. And, perhaps you're only thinking of the next election, but I think of my constituents in Port-Limoilou that want to see me, that want to meet with me, that want to talk to me about the situations that they're facing when it comes to employment insurance, seniors, retirement benefits, immigration issues. I have a huge number of people that are knocking on my door seeking my support, and that's just not possible in this instance. Now, obviously, during a non-sitting week, committees should take place, meetings should take place during the same time slots as during sitting weeks. And that is not the case in the case of yesterday and tomorrow. You know, we learned in the global news that there'll also be a meeting tomorrow, even though we received that notice of meeting at 9:45 this morning. And I am deeply troubled. There should be greater respect displayed to each other. Respect for our work, for our duties. Mr. Chairperson, on a point of order.
Moi, j'ai beaucoup de respect.
I have a lot of respect for the member. However, this is not a point of order.
Mr. Lawrence is right. If you could get to your point of order, Mrs. Vignola.
Mais écoutez, je faisais référence au règlement de la Chambre des...
Well, listen, I was referring to the House of Commons Standing Orders, 20th of June 2024, regarding notice required. And if this is not a point of order that I'm raising, what is it? That speaks to a problem here. If I'm not just talking about anything willy-nilly.
Him specifically, sorry.
Fait que c'est quand même assez clair.
Well, I thought it was quite clear what I was saying. I'm referring to the standing orders. This isn't coming out of nowhere.
I've had one answer, but we're double checking. If you want, or if you wish, bear with me. We'll suspend for a couple seconds and we'll just reconfirm. We are suspended for a couple moments. .48 hours is for election of the chair, and then there's a different time period for 106.4s, but not specifically to call a meeting. So, well, I appreciate your comments. We're going to proceed. Premier Mo, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, point of order
I've turned it over to Mr. Mo, our Premier Mo. Could you?
This is about, Mr. Chair, this is about Standing Order 108, which you have not addressed here, that states, and again, I want you to address it to this committee, that states, in compliance with instructions from the committee or an order from the House, the chair calls committee meetings, decides on the agenda.
Mr. Kuzmierczak,
You have done none of those things. You have done none of those things. And it is a shame and a farce, as Madame Vignal has stated.
Get your clip in, Mr. Kuzmierczak, and then I will address this.
That we have learned about tomorrow's meeting from global news as opposed from our chair. That is a farce. That is a farce. And it's a violation of the bedrock principles of the way that this committee has conducted its work over the last 5 years. That is shameful. It is shameful and disrespectful to the work of this committee. And as Madame Vignal has stated, we want to be able to prepare for our witnesses. We want to be able to have due preparation so that we can do the work that Canadians expect us to do. We have neither been provided any opportunity to consult. We've been provided no opportunity to provide instruction, and we have not been provided opportunity to prepare for this day. And that is on the chair. And you have not responded to Standing Order 108.
I have responded to that, Mr. Kuzmierczak. It is, the committee has instructed me to hold meetings on the estimates, and that's what this meeting is on the main estimates. So I have ruled on that. We're now going to turn things over to Premier Moe for a 5-minute opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I trust you can hear me all right. But I do appreciate the very warm Canadian welcome to your committee here this morning. I believe it likely started with a request by myself and a number of other premiers to appear before the Finance Committee, and I believe that request still stands, and we hope to hear back from them. And I think this is an important conversation for each of us as elected members, as next Monday we're going to see the carbon tax increase to a level that was previously never committed to achieve. When at its introduction, and I think that's important for us to just think about the words that we should never say never in this nation. Never say never. And I was at that meeting many years ago in Montreal, where there was a commitment made to go to a $50 carbon tax, and since then what we've seen is commitments to go much higher than that. But I would point more recently to July 15th in 2020 to some statements made by our Bank of Canada governor, and I quote, "Our message to Canadians is that interest rates are very low and they're going to be there for a long time." He goes on to say, if you've got a mortgage or you're considering making a major purchase, or you're a business and considering making an investment, you can be confident that rates will be low for a long time. Again, I would say never, because so much has happened since that point in time, July 15th, 2020. What that did is really provide a confirmation bias for some poor policy decision and enhancing or advancing continued poor policy decision, taking the carbon tax from 50 to a committed 170 now and beyond. Of which we will discuss here today, and our ask is to pause the increase that is coming on Monday, but also the development of clean electricity standards, clean fuel standards, which is really a second carbon tax, the methane 75 standards, which are unachievable, the oil cap.
Mr. Chair, a point of order. I don't mean to interrupt the Honourable Premier, but I do have a point of order here.
You are interrupting, though.
Mr. Kuzmierczak, the Premier just has a couple minutes left. Could we let him finish, and he can...
I am, but what I would like to, excuse me, Premier, I have a point of order.
Sorry, Premier, let me interrupt you. I'll freeze the time.
To speak on behalf of the Saskatchewan residents.
Thank you, Premier, and we're eager to hear from you. I just have a point of order that I'd like the Chair to clarify. We have been asked to study, specifically, this committee has been asked to study about 12 vote ones, okay? Including the Canada Post Corporation vote regarding the Canada School of Public Service.
Could you get to the point of order, Mr. Kuzmierczak?
Could you explain to us the relevance of the 12 votes that we have been assigned to consider? Because I don't see this particular subject matter connected in any way, shape, or form to the 12 votes that this committee has been asked to study. We are not the Finance Committee. We are the OGGO Committee. We have been asked to study 12 votes. I'm happy to answer that,
Mr. Kuzmierczak.
How does that relate to what we've been asked to study? Thank you. I appreciate that.
We always allowed a very wide range of questioning on the estimates and the supplementary estimates. The carbon tax raise is included in the main estimates, and therefore that's part of it. So I'll allow our Premier Moe to continue.
And very much, I think, important to Canadians, as this is one of the policies, and they are stacking, that is making life more unaffordable for not only Saskatchewan residents, but all Canadians as a whole. It's making industries less competitive. Those are industries that employ people in my community and quite likely in yours as well. And it is really showing no measurable impact when it comes to reducing emissions. And I would just point to the inflationary aspect of the carbon tax specifically today. And that was when the latest consumer price index came out. Saskatchewan today is at 1.7%, down under the 2% projected target that the Bank of Canada had hit, 1 full point lower than the Canadian average. And Statistics Canada had said specifically that was due to a decision that the Saskatchewan government made to remove the carbon tax from home heating. And so you can imagine what would happen to our CPI nationwide if we were to pause, first of all, and then remove the consumer carbon tax on Canadians. And I would say, where does this bring us today when we think about never saying never. Today, that same Bank of Canada over the last 2 years has increased our interest rates on 10 different occasions. Just this week, they have declared that Canada is in a productivity emergency. And I would say that we don't need to accept this moving forward. We can make changes. Never say never. There is another way, and Saskatchewan has been working towards that way for some time. The Bank of Canada had also indicated that there needs to be investment brought into our nation. We're second in the nation when we compare on per capita provincial investment today. We're up 25% last year, projected to be first this coming year with another 14% increase. And we need to, I think, all Canadians encourage just that investment, that competitive investment environment in each of our provinces and more broadly across the nation. There are opportunities for us then to take that investment in innovation and share it through commerce with the rest of the world, share it through Article 6 of the Paris Accord, for example, which this government signed and of which I worked on as environment minister with one of the previous environment ministers. Article 6, I think, is an opportunity for us to create policies that allow for that investment, and then in turn share those investment innovations with the rest of the world through commerce by employing Canadians in my community and yours, and utilizing some of the tools that we have, such as Article 6. And so there is another way. Never say never. And we need to ensure that we are looking at some of our competitive environment, those that are employing and creating wealth in our communities across this nation, to ensure that we're providing that platform to attract that capital investment, to attract those jobs, and ultimately to provide that opportunity for Canada to not be in a state where we're in a productivity emergency, but are in a state where we are leading the world with the productivity that we are experiencing as Canadians. That's traditionally, I think, what we all would like to achieve. And I hope that we would find some consensus on that today. And again, I wore my red tie in the spirit of collaboration. I wear it to our Council of Federation meetings where we come together as from different political backgrounds and different political stripes. But we come together with an effort and an initiative to, find a consensus on behalf of the Canadians that we collectively represent at that table. And I would say that this is an opportunity for all of us, those that are in the minority government that we have today and in opposition, to do what is in the best interest of Canadians, not just for today, but into the future as well, when it comes to creating jobs and sharing some of the sustainable innovations that have been invested on already in our nation, and enhancing the opportunity for additional investment into just those innovations in the industries that we do well. Because the fact of the matter is this, and this is from a Saskatchewan perspective: we produce food, fuel, and fertilizer, and we produce not only the highest quality, most affordable food, fuel, and fertilizer that you can find in the world, and we produce it for over 150 countries around the world. We produce the most sustainable food, fuel, and fertilizer that you can find on Earth. And I think that's something for each of us to remember: is never say never. We can always do better, and we should be making every effort to do that around this table on behalf of the folks that we represent. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier Moe. Mr. Reddekopp, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Premier Moe. It's great to have another common sense conservative voice in Ottawa, Saskatchewan voice, in Ottawa, to talk about the carbon tax. It's very clear that the Liberals are nervous about this meeting and that they don't really want to hear from Saskatchewan people, but I do. So, as you know, the Parliamentary Budget Officer has produced a report that confirms this year alone, the average family in Saskatchewan is going to lose $525 to the carbon tax. And the NDP Liberal Costly Coalition plans to quadruple the carbon tax, meaning that families in Saskatchewan will ultimately see their losses increasing to $1,723 a year, according to the same report. So the NDP Liberal Coalition will be ripping out thousands of dollars from the pockets of people in Saskatchewan. What's the impact of the carbon tax on families living in our province? Oh, you're muted, Mr.
My apologies. That's the annual impact directly to Saskatchewan families, taking into account what they are paying for the carbon tax, some of the indirect costs that are coming to them due to the carbon tax, a cost, for example, at the grocery store. But what we have in this province as well is that we're very much a natural resource-based economy here. Rooted in agriculture, and we're trying to climb that economic value chain. We're trying to climb with respect to the jobs that we're creating, the opportunities, and the market access that we're creating. For example, we're attracting investment into the canola oil industry so that we can provide canola oil as opposed to the raw seed. That's climbing that value chain. It's creating jobs here at home, and where the carbon tax comes in addition to the direct impact to Saskatchewan families that I would put forward, drive more just because we are more geographically dispersed, in particular those families in the north. But it also comes into a significant impact in the jobs that are available here because industries are looking with, this is a hindrance for their investment. We have been able to attract significant investment in spite, I would say, of this hindrance, not in any way because of it. However, that's not to say that we aren't having active discussions with the industry and the people of Saskatchewan on how we continue to reduce our carbon footprint here. And so the impact is very real to families directly. It's very real, I would say, in particular to northern families, where they traditionally have been heating their homes with electricity. They are seeing some solace and savings in that with the recent decision that the provincial government has made here. And we, again, extend to the federal government the opportunity to extend their decision around home heating fuel to all Canadians and all types of heating fuel. But they are having some reprieve on that as we speak. But I would say they still have to drive a significant distance for any significant level of supplies. And so families very much are feeling it directly. They're also feeling it through the job prospects and opportunities, of which I'd say are strong in Saskatchewan, but certainly could be even stronger.
So you've been a strong opponent of the carbon tax since you took office. Your predecessor, Brad Wall, was as well. You've had the opportunity to speak with the Prime Minister, launch legal challenges, et cetera. How many different appeals have you made to Ottawa to stop the carbon tax?
All of them. On every occasion that I've had the opportunity to speak with the Prime Minister, whether it be most recently, we had a significant presence at COP28 in Dubai. Saskatchewan did. We had over 60 provincial and national businesses, delegation, industry representatives, post-secondary folks that were with us there. I had the opportunity to speak with a couple of ministers, including the Minister of Environment in that setting. Each and every time through multiple ministers and the Prime Minister himself, we have voiced our opposition to this, what is essentially amounts to an inflationary tax. My predecessor, at the very early days of its introduction, and I remember it well because I was Environment Minister at the time, I was in Montreal when the Prime Minister raised to his feet and introduced this tax on Canadians. I believe it was October the 3rd, 2016, if I'm not mistaken. But my predecessor, Brad Wall, had very quickly asked for, has anyone done the economic analysis on this? And I think what we're seeing today with the Bank of Canada's statement, Bank of Canada Governor's statement, or the Bank of Canada's statement around the productivity emergency that we are facing in this nation, tells us that, no, we haven't done an economic analysis on this policy and many others, but it's high time we should. And I'm not in any way saying that we should be making decisions that are increasing the emissions in our industries, but we should be looking at what are the emissions in our industries relative to their counterparts and competitors in other areas of the world. Are we cleaner? And can we do more? And in the meantime, we should ensure that we are making every effort to make our cleaner products available to the world, displacing some of those dirtier products that are produced in other areas. And I think if you accept the fact that climate change is real, if you accept the fact that climate change is a global challenge, not just one in Saskatchewan or even Canada for that matter, we need to work together with our national partners on achieving global solutions.
So as you know, the federal NDP has been a strong supporter of the carbon tax, and they voted to support this Liberal government every time, including a couple of times last week. As Premier, how do you feel about an NDP party that supports this hurtful carbon tax and is seemingly against our farmers, against our oil and gas producers, and just not willing to listen to the pain of everyday folks in Saskatchewan?
It's disappointing because we have a provincial arm of that NDP party here that opposes Saskatchewan's wishes to remove the carbon tax, the consumer carbon tax off of Saskatchewan families, and ultimately the cost that it instills on the industries that are employing those very same families. When it comes to oil and gas, for example, and I'm happy to say that if the rest of the world produced oil and gas like we do here in Saskatchewan, the similar type products, global emissions from oil production would drop 25% overnight. That hasn't come about easily. That has come about by investment in the Saskatchewan energy industry, investment in methane reductions. And so the 60% methane reductions that were put forward a couple of years ago, our oil industry was actually able to meet them. They cannot get to the 75%. That will close down significant parts of the oil industry.
Yeah, I have to cut you off there. Thanks. Mr. Kuzmierczak, please go ahead, sir.
I believe it's Charles.
Mr. Sousa, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Premier, for being here today. Can you advise this committee, when were you contacted to appear before us today? You're on mute, sir.
My apologies. We have moved away from most of the online stuff, but I do appreciate the opportunity. I don't know if I was contacted or if I had had a discussion with another premier or two about our request was actually to appear before the Finance Committee. We've not heard back from the Finance Committee at this point in time. So I guess I was contacted. I can't say exactly when. I can find out though.
Did you have discussions last week about this?
This past week. What day is today?
Okay, that's fine, Mr. Spider.
Yeah.
Keep in mind that the people of Saskatchewan, the tremendous work they do is greatly appreciated. All of Canada has to stand united in terms of improving our economy, supporting trade, initiating competitiveness, and fighting climate, and ensuring that we lower overall emissions to support a green economy. And I think you've said that in so many words. And you've reaffirmed that it's important for us to stand united. And of course, the federal government has also invested $100 million or so in the Potage mine, and we recognize the importance of regional economic growth for the benefit of all of Canada. Premier, you applauded the Supreme Court of Canada's finding in the Federal Impact Assessment Act. You recognize the jurisprudence of the Supreme Court of Canada?
Most certainly, we do.
And you encourage Saskatchewan residents to also abide by the laws you put in forth, like the sales tax that you've increased, the fees that you've imposed. You want your residents to pay their taxes. You don't want them breaking the law. Is that correct?
100%. We have a sales tax 3% lower than where it was under the New Democrats, yes.
And so we want to make certain that everyone abides by the law. You're a man of law and you're a man of order. The Supreme Court also found that the federal pollution pricing system is constitutional. And I know you're disputing it and you're going forward, and that's appropriate. But do you recognize the top court of this country when they make their decisions, sir?
Certainly, and we expect these decisions to end up in a similar court at some point in time.
You've already stated that you do want to lower emissions, correct? You want to see Canada and Saskatchewan. You're the former Minister of Environment. You see the benefit?
I would say Saskatchewan's already participating in the lowering of our emissions.
And there probably is a pricing system, a carbon trade within some of your major polluters now. I know in Ontario, we instituted a cap and trade back in 2017-16 when I was Minister of Finance to try to find a pricing system to exempt Ontario from the alternative, which is the federal program, which they're encouraging us to do to initiate and support the green economy and enable us to be competitive and abide by international laws because, of course, our farmers and others are competing out there. We want them to do well. Did Saskatchewan ever consider an alternative system?
Yes, we did. All of them were costly to our industry, as is the federal backstop that we're experiencing now, as well as costly to Saskatchewan families.
And so you're of the opinion, never say never, but it sounds like kick the can down the road for next generation to deal with. Right? What we need is to take initiative and ensure that we are prepared to do what's necessary for future generations and ensure that we're competitive, right?
Yeah, quite proud of what Saskatchewan's doing. I mentioned the oil industry and what they have already done through investments in that industry. But, our ag industry, our Global Institute for Food Security just did a study on comparing, for example, wheat and canola production and the amount of carbon in a ton of Saskatchewan wheat and canola relative to the next 7 largest producers around the world. 64% lower carbon content in a Saskatchewan ton of wheat and canola than the next 7 producers. When it comes to field peas, that's 92% lower. So I would say, with all due respect, Saskatchewan industries are most certainly doing their part, and we're going to continue to.
And I applaud the efforts that the people of Saskatchewan are taking to move forward.
We appreciate that.
Sir, before I go on to my next point,
sure.
Can you provide this committee with some documents as to how you came to be here, like your schedule and who it was that was contacting you and when it was contacted in order for you to appear today?
If the committee feels that's of relevance,
it is.
What I would ask also is maybe this committee would encourage the chair of the Finance Committee to allow the premiers that's the original request to present at that committee as well. And
by all
I
means,
think it's important.
Provide both. That'd be great. Chair, I'd like to move forward a notice of motion at this point, and I'll have it translated into French, and it reads as follows: that when the committee undertakes to invite witnesses, that a witness list submission deadline be set by the chair with explicit consent of the committee. B, witnesses be invited proportionally to each recognized party standing in the House. And C, no such witnesses be invited without instructions of the committee.
I'm moving this motion forward.
Point of order.
Point of
I
order.
want to clarify if the member was moving motion or actually giving notice.
I'm moving I'm moving the motion. I'm sorry.
Point of order.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mr. Phillips.
I don't believe that motion is in order.
All right, just gives me 2 seconds. Thanks, Mr. Sousa. So I assume that you're moving it as a matter of hand motion, which I don't believe it's a matter of hand, so I'm not going to rule it in order, Mr. Sousa.
Mr. Chair, I would like to challenge that. I mean, right now, there's been methods
That's fine.
made.
If you wish to challenge the chair,
I do wish to challenge it and move forward the motion and explain why. I mean, there's been instances that we've already noted this earlier before the meeting that unilateral decisions are being made, decisions to move meetings and witnesses without notice to us. It's impacting on members' privilege. It's also disrespecting some of our members. It's a violation of our. So
Mr. Sousa, I'm going to interrupt. We will go right to the. Yeah, we'll go right to it. I'm advised by the clerk it's treated similar to a dilatory, so there's not a chance to speak on it. But we will go right to the vote on it, Mr. Sousa. Mr. Clerk.
Shall the decision of the chair be sustained? Ms. Atwin.
No.
Mr. McKinney.
No.
Monsieur Drouin.
No.
Mr. Kusmarczyk.
No.
Mr. Sousa.
No.
Mr. Chambers.
Sustain.
Mr. Lawrence.
Yes, sustain.
Ms. Crump-Newman.
Yes.
Madame Vignola.
No.
Monsieur Boulris.
No.
3 yeas, 7 nays.
So the motion, I don't believe it's valid, but we will debate it. Just give me 2 seconds, so I need to check something else with the chair. So bear with me 1 second, Mr. Sousa. Mr. Sousa, are you sending in both languages?
Oh, yeah, I got it.
Yes, we are.
Colleagues, there is a procedural thing with this that we have to go over with the analysts and the chair, so I'm going to suspend for a few minutes while we take a look at this. Just bear with us a couple minutes. Premier Moe, I apologize.
Yeah.
Mr. Sousa, the floor is yours, or are you fine with that as it's presented? I think it has or is going out very shortly in both languages.
Is it-
Are we ready just to move to a vote on it, colleagues? Do we need to vote on it? I'm sensing, I see nodding heads all around.
On division?
Pass it.
On
I
division?
request a recorded division.
Sure.
Ms. Atwin,
In favor?
Mr. McKinnon,
Yes.
Monsieur Drouin,
En faveur.
Mr. Kaczmarczyk,
Support.
Mr. Sousa. Mr. Sousa.
You're muted, Mr. Sousa.
Yes,
Thanks.
Yes. Mr. Chambers,
No.
Mr. Lawrence,
No.
Ms. Grant Newman,
No.
Madame Vignola,
Oui.
Monsieur Boulris,
En faveur.
7 yeas, 3 nays.
Okay, that passes. We're now on to Mrs. Vignola. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Sousa there.
Monsieur Mouge,
Premier Moore, I'd like to thank you nevertheless for being here today. Now, I do have a couple of questions for you, particularly to do with the fact that you find that the current government is too much of a centrist government. Now, coming from Quebec, I kind of agree with you there. Now, when it comes to centralization, the federal government is trying to encroach on areas of jurisdiction that belong to you and that belong to Quebec, for example, in the area of healthcare, with strings attached or dividing up transfer payments. Now, from my recollection, you had called for a transfer to the tune of 35% of the healthcare services budget. And just like the other premiers, you didn't get that. What would a 35% to healthcare transfer allow you to do, allow you to improve, not only within the framework of your own budget, but in terms of the healthcare services provided to people from your province? Secondly, can the federal government really know what your healthcare needs are in Saskatchewan?
I will answer those in reverse. So the second question of the federal government knowing what the health care, whoever the federal government is, not just this administration, what the needs are in Saskatchewan or British Columbia or the territories or in Atlantic Canada or Quebec or Ontario. At a high level, possibly, but they should always be looking for opportunities to work with the subnational jurisdiction on how they can traditionally fund. Traditionally, our healthcare was funded 50-50. There was tax points that were moved to the province a number of years ago, and that's how the chair of our Council of Federation at that point in time was Premier Legault from Quebec, and we very much were supportive of returning the healthcare funding balance back to the 35-65 that it was always intended to be. What would that mean to Saskatchewan? Well, you know, where we did land with the federal funding was a 2.6% increase, I believe, over the next 5 years. We just released our budget here this past year. It was 10.4% was the lift that we had provided to healthcare. Some of that is actually to change in how we deliver healthcare here in the province. And so a 35% lift would restore the balance. I think what you're seeing happen today is provinces, and you're seeing a number of their budgets come out as we speak. Provinces are making up the difference in many cases. And that's what we are doing here. And that's why I think the very importance of this committee meeting on ensuring that we have a palatable and attractive investment environment, because it's only in our case in Saskatchewan through the strength of our growing economy that we're actually able to make that 10.4% investment in health
healthcare. A 9% investment in education, again, another provincial area of jurisdiction. And so we have many points of agreement with Premier Legault at our Council of Federation table and beyond. I think Premier Legault intervened, as did 8 other provinces. 7 other provinces, Quebec and ourselves, pardon me, that intervened on Saskatchewan's behalf in the Supreme Court case when it came to removing the carbon tax, the consumer carbon tax on Canadians. We in turn have collaborated with Premier Legault on advocating and working through our First Minister's table to increase our
Thank you. Thank you.
provinces.
Merci.
Well, thank you. On that very matter, as far as Quebec is concerned, we don't have a carbon tax. And the impact on the price increases, according to 165 economists across Canada, well, and I don't want to in any way minimize what the residents of Saskatchewan are feeling and experiencing when I say this, but in Quebec, it is the carbon market alongside California, which is the wealthiest state of the United States. In Quebec, the carbon market has put back in the coffers $1.5 billion. The Canadian provinces had the opportunity to join Quebec in that carbon exchange that was not only good for the government coffers, but also for businesses, companies and corporations, because it stimulated innovation in those companies. At the end of the day, why did Saskatchewan make a different choice? And if Saskatchewan wants to get rid of the carbon tax, well, what steps will Saskatchewan take in order to reduce the impacts of climate change and to drive down greenhouse gas emissions? You'll recall that the carbon tax is a similar measure to one that was put in place in the past to diminish or reduce oxidous sulfur emissions. And we have 65% fewer emissions of oxidous sulfur. And we'd like that to happen Canada-wide, and in Quebec in particular, thanks to a carbon marketplace. So why didn't you follow suit, i.e. the carbon market or the carbon exchange, which is kind of lucrative in both the middle and short term?
Great, we're out of time. If you could offer as short as answer as you can, please.
This really speaks to the diversity in our nation. What works in one area of the nation may not work ideally in another area of the nation. And I think this is a reason why if you don't have a federal government that isn't working collaboratively with all subnational governments across the nation, you are destined to fail in your policy development. With respect to the carbon tax specifically, we've always said that it's a harmful tax from day one. And we've always also said, outside of Quebec, it's been reasonably fairly imposed, as harmful as it is across the nation. What we've seen more recently with the decisions on that impact heating fuel in Atlantic Canada is that, again, outside of Quebec, and now this tax isn't being applied fairly across the nation or imposed fairly across the nation in any way. And that's why we made the decisions that we did when it comes to home heating fuel, forgiving the rebating the carbon tax on natural gas and electricity.
Sorry, we're past our time. Mr. Boulerice, welcome to OGGO. You have 6 minutes, sir.
Merci beaucoup. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, and thank you to our guest. I'm very glad to have an opportunity to speak with the Premier of Saskatchewan today, even though I still don't really understand how it turned out that he's appearing before this committee when we're supposed to be turning our attention to other issues, i.e. the estimates. But given that he is here, I'll take this opportunity. Premier Moe, you'll agree with me that climate change is having increasing impacts on communities, many of your communities in Saskatchewan, that over the recent years have experienced substantial forest fires. There's an increasing number over time. It has an impact on public health and on the evacuees that have had to leave their homes. In 2023, your province had thousands of forest fires, which is far above the 150 average. and the surface area that was affected was 10 times bigger than what would normally occur. And the skies were smoke-filled for days on end, and folks had difficulty breathing. Now, Canada is a laggard on the world stage when it comes to our greenhouse gas emissions. Canada did sign the Paris Accord, and I imagine you are aware of the objectives under the Paris Accord. Now, how is it that we shouldn't make the big polluters pay, those that have a real bearing on our climate change? What's your game plan to deal with those big emitters, please?